Okay, so my question for you guys today, because so far we've got done talking about the directors, we talked about the talent last time we were here. The time before that we talked about videos and production, then we talked about your favorite film, and then the technology behind video. Today what I want to do is really hit on the point, or hit on producers, and talk about what producers do. So my first question for you guys today is, what is a producer, and whom or what is he or she responsible for? I want you guys to talk it over with your group. Last time I had you guys discuss it out with the oldest person in your group and had that person share out. This time through, I want the youngest person in your group to share out. Okay, cool. So with that said, we'll be back in a couple minutes. All right, cool. We are done. We are coming back here. All right, any group want to share out what you guys think the producer is? Sweet. So we're going to go to group 2 this time through back here. Who's the youngest one back here, guys? Marissa, talk to me about what you think the producer does.
So he basically, coordinator.
Okay.
Coordinates
Okay, good. Okay, so we have financial option, and coordination. Those are the keywords that I'm hearing out of there. And again, if I'm wrong with these keywords when I write them down, just let me know, guys, and I will make a correction. But I hear coordination as well as finances. And then how old are you? 14. Fantastic. Next person we're going to go over here to group 4, right back here in the back. Youngest person. Go for it. What do you got? In charge of the script? What do you mean, Kimberly?
They see if it's a grade.
Cool, good, good. I'm just going to put script down here. And then how old are you? 14. So we got a couple of 14-year-olds. All right, last group, we'll jump right here at 6, group 6. Awesome. Robert?
The producer is basically someone that assembles all the clips, audio.
Okay, cool. And then how old are you, sir? 14 as well. Fantastic. Okay, so you can kind of see the diverse range. 17, 18-year-olds down to 14-year-olds in here. Kind of want you guys to see that. So I'm talking to way different crowds. So when I try and give some of these lectures, I'm trying to keep that stuff in mind, trying to make it as applicable and as fun-ish, as informative as I possibly can for those that are really old, but also those that are coming right out of junior high. You guys kind of hit it, almost hit it directly on point with what is a producer. Okay. Producer is actually the most important job on a production. If you do not have a producer, you do not have a production or a product. And so we'll talk about this a little bit more, but a producer is someone who oversees and preserves 3 things. And all of those things you guys discussed and talked about in there are involved with these 3 items. But it's the integrity, the voice, and the vision of a production. Okay? Producer isn't just limited specifically to film. A producer is anyone who is creating or producing things. And when someone produces something, they're trying to preserve the integrity of that particular item. And when I say the integrity of that item, they're trying to make sure that it's appropriate for what it is that you're making it for. For example, if you're going to be playing or producing points in a basketball game, you're not going to learn how to throw a football, right? So you want to say you're integral to that particular sport. You want to learn how the system works, the structure works, and you preserve that system and structure and continue to assemble yourself or integrate, that's the better word for it, into that particular structure. And that you continue to do better and develop skills. Not only that, but you're developing a voice and a vision for whatever it is that you're actually doing. So you can talk about it and you can see it. So when it comes to film, you want to understand how things work inside of that particular structure, which is why these first few weeks, I spent a lot of time in the lecture portion, because I'm trying to give you guys an understanding of what the industry is like and what the parameters are first before we actually jump into the thing. And then you start developing the voice, so the audio portion of your particular video, and then the vision or the video portion of your particular video. It's not just here, I'm going to put this up and film this and take this and toss this into here and hopefully everything will come together. It's what does this mean in comparison to this, and how are we going to fill in the gap between this and this to make sure that it makes sense that we get from this to this, right? So that's what a producer does, overseeing it and preserving it. Okay, we'll get into the 3 different types of producers here in a little bit, but the one thing I want to follow up on first is a production. So remember, anytime you see this word review up here, it's something we've gone over or we've had in class. If you missed a day or that doesn't make sense to you, go back and rewrite it down. If you see it up here multiple times, it's probably really important, so you probably want to star next to stuff each time you see it in your particular notes, because that's probably important to a quiz or a test later on. Okay. We talked about how a production is the act of making or manufacturing something from separate components. So a producer is the one who is acting, taking a bunch of different stuff, separate components all over the place, and putting stuff together, bringing it forth so we can actually see it. Okay. So when it comes to this particular school, we have a lot of producers. Okay. Producers, for the most part, are your guys' parents. If parents are not involved with the school, if they just send their kids there and then say, hey, you guys kind of take over, well, the directors are going to do whatever they want to do, right? They're going to direct and go in whatever direction it is they want to go, whether it's academically, politically, or whatever. The producers, your parents, are the ones that keep us back in line, saying, hey, wait, this is how I want my kid to grow up. You got to make sure this is how you're teaching in class. Okay? They're the check against the direction. Right? So what I like to do is I like to equate the differences between producers and directors. Directors are the ones that are like the king of the castle, right? Or like the president. They're the one that rules over it and that controls things. But that's the director. But the producer is God. Oh, nice. God is the one who oversees everything, takes a look at it, and if that director or that person in charge isn't doing what they're doing, boom, we're going to yank them out. Okay, so in the U.S., a lot of the producers are the people. The directors are the people we elect when it comes to public offices and politics. Okay, it's a great way to kind of take a look at it. Okay, so we talked about what a director is, and how we kind of defined that as well. We talked about how a director is the person who is responsible for and manages others in the making of a production. Like I said, king of the castle, king of the county, president of the area or whatever, leading people in a direction. Producer, watching it, making sure things don't get too out of control, that things kind of stay in line. Right? So here's what a producer does. So from the inception of the idea, so when you first get an idea, through the development of that idea, to the completion and delivery of that idea as a project, the producer is the one that's most actively involved, making sure each part of the project is being fulfilled correctly. Each process in that project is being fulfilled correctly. So the director can set things up and take it a direction. The producer is allowing the director to continue to go that direction. Director should have some ideas and should say, here's where I see us going. This is how we get there. Okay. Producer just says, this is where I see us going. Can you get us there? Right? So there's a lot of back and forth between producers and directors. Okay. If we take, for example, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the executive producer of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is Kevin Feige, or Kevin Feige, or however you pronounce his last name, right? It's like my name. It's difficult to pronounce. Okay, but I think it's Kevin Feige. He is the executive producer of all the Marvel films. He is, from the ideas through the development of the scripts to the completion and delivery of those films, he is the one that's overseeing everything. He's actively being involved. Yes, you can have Taika or Taika Waititi or whatever direct films. You can have the Russo brothers direct films, okay? But Kevin Feige is the one going, no, we wouldn't do this because this character doesn't do that. This is what we're trying to do with this particular character, right? So directors can have vision. They're allowed to go in a specific direction, but the producers are the ones that allow them to go in that particular direction. All right, let's go ahead and pop back into that, right? Sorry about that. So that's who's the one who's making the most decisions throughout the process, the producer. Got a question, Jacob? Go for it.
So was the original vision behind the film is controlled by the producer and then is given to the directors too?
Yeah, so we'll talk about this. We'll talk about this a little bit when we get to the part of the writer. But yes, the producer's the one who has the vision. Because the writer can write a script and submit that, but it's a producer's job to decide to pick that up or not. And a great way to see that is by taking a look at the film producers. And we'll take a look at the behind-the-scenes version of that. There's a comedic version of it. But Mel Brooks kind of really saw how this was possible when he actually started to develop a particular film. He found out that, hey, most people would actually like to see a comedic take on what producers actually do. So let's kind of go behind the scenes a little bit and take a look at what that's like. So hopefully that'll provide insight. Go, Jacob.
One more. So
Yep, go for it.
can producers also be writers?
Yes. Yes, producers can be writers. Producers can also be directors. You sometimes will see produced, written, and directed by M. Night Shyamalan, Christopher Nolan, and so on and so forth. The problem is that, or the, not the problem, the thing is you want to make sure you understand what role you're undertaking when you're doing something. Because if you have no one there to check your vision, like let's say you're a director, you have no one there to check your vision and make sure that you can do stuff and you're the only person, well, if it fails, then you fail. And if you fail, good luck trying to get another job in either of those positions, if that makes sense. So you have to make sure that you have a very cognizant understanding of what it is that you're doing. Okay, so let's take a look at the producers.
Amazing. It's absolutely amazing. But under the right circumstances, a producer could make more money with a flop than he could with a hit. Let's assume, just for the moment, that you are a dishonest man.
I love you!
Assume away. You simply raise more money than you really need. Don't forget the checky. If you were certain that the show would fail, a man could make a fortune.
Hello, boys. So in order for this scheme to work, we'd have to find a surefire flop.
What scheme?
Somewhere in the back of my head, I knew there was a good story in the adventures of this producer that I was working for when I was 16 years old. He's an unforgettable character, so one day I'm going to write a story about him.
I started studying acting when I was 13, and all I wanted to do was be a stage actor. But when I met Mel, he said, I'm writing a screenplay called Springtime for Hitler. Would you like to play that part of Leo Bloom? I said, oh, sure, I would, of course. And that started my whole career.
I'm sorry. I don't like people touching my blue blanket.
I didn't know who Mel Brooks was. I didn't know who Zero Mostel was. I thought he was a number. I had never heard of him before.
You know who I used to be? Max Bialystock, king of Broadway, 6 shows running at once.
He liked to think of himself as difficult. I mean, he really was that character. I mean, you know, it was so larger than life.
How dare you condemn me without knowing all the facts?
Mr. Bialystock,
I'm having a rhetorical conversation.
I'm Kamenghi, Monsieur Debris' private secretary. Would you please remove your shoes?
When I first saw the film, I thought that I really better make my bag and leave America, because after that, I will never work again. I really, really thought that.
Nobody ever said a bad word about Winston Churchill, did they?
I didn't know whether the character was crazy or Kenny Mars was crazy.
You have broken the secret lost. You must die.
I thought, this will help me if I take this costume home and I sleep in it every night, which I did.
Gentlemen, it is magic time. Good luck.
He first asked me to do the number,
Okay, cool. So that's good enough in there, right? This film by Mel Brooks was updated in the mid-2000s, I want to say. It was done with Matthew Broderick, Will Ferrell, and Nathan Lane. So this is the 1960s version of it. But I wanted you to kind of get a little bit of behind the scenes for what it's like to take a look at a producer. Okay, so the producer's goal, we found out from in here that producers can actually make money, right? And this is what was alluded to a little bit earlier when I was asking you guys what a producer does. Producer's job is to go out and find content that can help keep their job as well as everyone else's job that's working on a particular production, right? If you find just the right film, you actually can make more money with a flop than with a hit. That's what Mel Brooks actually found out when he was thinking about these things. He started figuring out, hey, if you hire really, really cheap people and you raise a bunch of money in order to put on this particular production, and you don't pay all that money out to all the different people that are really, really cheap, you, as the producer, can bank all the money on the back end. Now, no one's ever going to work with you again, so it's a one-time shot, but that's kind of hilarious that that could actually work. And by the way, that can actually work in real life. Very dishonest, but it's typical business practices, as it were, in Hollywood. Okay? Taking the concept of a producer trying to find a hit and not being able to do that, and take two, let's try that again. If taking a flop and all of a sudden it becomes a hit, that might not actually be good for a producer because they're trying to bank all the money on the back end and they won't necessarily get a whole lot of money from that. Okay? Most of the time, producers, what they actually want to do is find a hit. And when you find a hit, you can make more money off of it because it makes you a better person. It makes you more valuable because you found something that tapped into the culture zeitgeist, as it were. And it allows you to continue to make fun, interesting type films because you've made something a success. Okay? So this is kind of really what I wanted to hit at, is what exactly does a producer do? Now these next two slides are the largest slides, or the longest slides, I should say, that you guys will get from me the entire year. Okay? The reason why they're the largest slides and they have the most content on them is because of how much a producer does. Okay? Whether you're working on your own, whether you're working with a group, the producer is the one who is taking a look at everything that is happening in that particular production. They're the ones that are helping you make the decisions. They're not making the decisions for you. They're helping you make the decisions along the way. Okay? So here's what a producer does from the beginning to the end. Right? When they first start off, a producer will try and find material from a book or a script. Okay? The reason why they're going to find material already written is because if you can take material already written, you don't have to come up with the idea. Someone else already came up with the idea. Now it's time to execute it. So producers are trying to figure out, what are people thinking about? What are they talking about? Because if people are thinking and talking about very specific things and you give them more of that, in theory, they will continue to watch and take a look at your content. Right? So if we take the idea of a news producer trying to figure out what people are talking about and discussing, or trying to figure out what content they might want to talk about or discuss, you can see why you're going to hear more political news through our discourse throughout the day. You're going to see why you can take an individual like our current president, who's very, very controversial, and make that the news story day after 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 day. Right? Because people have an opinion, either one way or the other. They're very binary. It's either 0 or 1, either for or against. It's not something that requires a lot of nuance. Right? So for people that hate that particular individual, it's very easy for them to attach onto news or information that discusses the bad things that that individual does. If individuals like that person, they're not going to find a lot of things that they're going to like about that individual out in the news, because it's much better for you to rise up and to defend someone that's being attacked. Right? You come across as more noble. So if you're a news producer, you're not going to do really good stories about our current president. Why? Because the people that really like him want to seem noble in the defense that they have for that particular individual. And the people that dislike them want to fight and attack and take it down because that person shouldn't be where they're at. So you can see as a producer, when you're going out trying to find material and get information in line for your script for a particular day, why that would be important for you to know and understand. Because the more stories you can do, the more information you can generate, the more content and revenue you can make and generate, the more likely you are to put food on your table, the more likely you are to survive another day. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. right? So that's a good way to take a look at it just if you're a news producer. If you're a film producer and you find a book or a script, it's great to kind of pull from content-wise, because if you find just the right story to tell to just the right amount of people, you can spend $200 million and make $2 billion back. 1,000% increase. You literally make $1.8 billion on the high end of that. So you have incentive to find good information and to start there first, not pick up a camera and start going and running different places, right? You want to try and actually initiate as much as possible what people are going to be discussing, or you want to find out what they are discussing already and monetize that as much as you possibly can. Okay, so the producer's part, again, is to get the script in a good enough shape to attract a director. Once you attract, take two, take three, attract a director, then you can start securing financing, okay, because these things aren't just made by themselves. So a producer's going to go and ask, hey, if you give us $1,000 here, we'll pay you $2,000 back when the film's a hit. Start figuring out all those different contracts, right, and raising as much money as you possibly can. If you don't raise enough money to pay that person back and they end up losing all their money, they're not likely to give you more money again later on for you to be producing things again. Okay, so again, producers trying to choose a director, other creative parts of the team, they help cast the actors, they determine locations and budget, they decide on a cinematographer, who we'll get to in a little bit, how much of the film should be special effects, and if so, how much money they're going to be spending in that area. Again, financing comes into play. They develop a shooting schedule and timeline, so that way these actors that already have other gigs know when they need to apportion a part of their calendar for this particular gig. Okay, and they create a very detailed plan of action. This is all before cameras ever start rolling. Okay, a lot of time and effort is put into this stuff, and this is why most projects typically tend to die, because if you're not spending this much time to choose or go in this particular direction, it's probably not worth your time and energy to actually do. Even if you already have a camera on your own person, what are we using this for? What are we doing it for? Okay, so if you don't know what it is that you're doing, you're going to be very reluctant to actually go and pick up that camera and to go do the thing, right? One of the things I always ask my B&N students and then my level 3 students, what is this for? Why do you need to borrow equipment? Because if I'm going to give you $5,000 worth of equipment to take out of this classroom, I got to know what it's going towards, right? And if you don't deliver a good project on the back end, that stuff's not going out again, right? Okay. Again, if I go too fast or too quick, this will be up on the Haiku page a little bit later on for you guys to take a look at, or you can always go back and watch the video that I record for these. And you can go back and take a look at that, or you can pull out your phone and take a picture of the screen if that would be easier. Okay, so we talked about the pre-production portion. What about after pre-production? What does a producer do? Okay, after pre-production, the producer, in theory, should take a step back. While you're going out to film, they're not doing too much. They'll offer creative suggestions to the director, they'll monitor the budget and the timetable, but for the most part, if they hired the right people to do the thing, they don't have to worry about the thing because they hired the right people to do the thing. They can go back and start looking for other projects that they can get, because by the time you get into post-production, and you can see that this project is coming to the end, you have to have another production to go to, otherwise, again, you don't put food on your table, you don't get to eat, you don't get to survive, you don't get to wake up the next morning, right? So you got to keep that in mind as you're running through all these things. So during production, they'll review the videos that are coming in to make sure the director's staying on point, but for the most part, they're just acting as a check. Okay? Steven Spielberg was a producer for the Transformers series. Transformers 3, there were 2 individuals that had a problem. Now, those individuals were Michael Bay and her name is Megan Fox. Okay? If you remember, Megan Fox was in the first 2 Transformers. She was slated to be in the 3rd one. They started filming the 3rd one. And then there started to be creative differences and problems between her and Michael Bay. It actually got to the point where Megan Fox called Michael Bay a Nazi. Okay, love throwing around that term these days. But the reason why she did was because he was ordering people around on set to do different things and was very precise, very direct, and at some points would yell at her to go do what she was hired to do. She didn't necessarily like being treated that way. So Steven Spielberg, who was a producer, came in, sat the 2 of them down, talked and discussed things with them, let Megan tell her side of the story, let Michael follow up with his side of the story, and then Steven Spielberg made a decision. Okay? And that decision by Steven Spielberg was, hey, don't call the person I hired as a director a Nazi, which is something that my grandparents and my parents went through inside of Germany. Because I think it was his parents, more so than his grandparents, were actually locked up. And I don't know if it was Auschwitz or what it was, but because they were Jewish, that slur that was being tossed back at someone that Steven Spielberg had hired really hit home and offended him. And it got to the point where basically Steven Spielberg said, he didn't say it exactly like this, but basically said, you're just the pretty face of the film, Megan. If you have a problem with this, we'll just hire another pretty face. And you can go try your hand in the acting world. And so that's when she was asked to leave. She left the production. They hired literally a model with no acting experience to act in her place, because literally it's just a pretty face. She went to go do a film called Jennifer's Body, if I remember correctly, and really hasn't made her way back inside of Hollywood since. She kind of did a little bit with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but hasn't really gone too far anywhere because of this one incident, right? So you really have to fight your battles and plan your attacks accordingly if you're going to knock after someone who's a producer or director. This is why the Harvey Weinstein thing that happened and the Me Too movement that fell as a result of it, there was so many stories behind the scenes because no one ever talked about it. Because once you get to that position of power as a producer, if you're the one that's supplying the money, if you're the one that's supplying the projects, you can see why you'd get more passes in that particular role if you're doing inappropriate things. Doesn't make it right at all, but you can understand how something like that would happen. And why he's not in jail, I have no idea. Okay? So that's production. Post-production. This is what a producer does after everything is done, when the special effects carts start rolling in. They'll discuss the order and selection of scenes with the director. So just because something is written some way doesn't mean it's edited in that order, and it's not shot in that order. So typically you shoot by location as opposed to position you're at in the story, because otherwise you'd be jumping around all over the place, right? So they'll discuss the scenes. Sometimes they might take something at the end, move it to the beginning, something at the beginning, put it in the middle. They'll juxtapose some things around. The review, what's called the fine cut of the film, which means scenes are slotted together. And as they're slotted together, great, let's take a look and see if they're slotted correctly. Cool, now you can go back and fix them, right? They'll then polish, revise, and restructure the film to create the final cut of the film. And then they'll figure out how to distribute it or send it out to a bunch of different people. Is this something we're going and putting up on YouTube or on the iTunes store? Is this something that's going in the theaters? Or is this something that we're going to put on Quibi? You're like, Quibi? What the heck is Quibi? You'll hear about Quibi a lot soon. Okay? So they'll figure out how to distribute and figure out how to market this particular film. All right? You guys, for the purposes of this class, I've already worked out all this stuff. Well, not all this stuff. The distribution part of it for you, how you guys will be turning it into me, because it doesn't necessarily go out. If you want to take it out and send it out and show whatever films you make in here to other people, cool, that's good. You guys can do that kind of on your own end. But for the most part, it's going to be self-contained and sent in to me as a particular project for the purposes of this class. Okay? So what kinds of producers do we have? Categories of producers. There's 3. Okay. We have executive producer, associate or co-producers, or just the regular producers if you want to call them that, and then line producers. Okay. Executive producer, that particular title is reserved for someone who gives significant contribution to a project in some way, shape, or form, but they themselves are not running that particular project. So for example, J.J. Abrams, he will be an executive producer for a lot of things where he'll give his input and try and guide people in a particular direction, and he'll get that executive producer input. But he's not there day in and day out. Gotta love all the emails, right? He's not gonna be there day in and day out, check and make sure that things are going a particular way. Okay, that's how he is on Cloverfield. This is how he was with Star Wars Episode 8. He was just kind of back and letting Rian Johnson do his own thing. He's just like, yeah, that sounds good enough to me, just go ahead and go that direction. Right? Executive basically means high up. Producer means they're producing. So in some way, shape, or form, they might have a small contribution, but their name is big enough to attract different people in. Okay. Associate and co-producers. Associate and co-producers, this title is typically reserved for individuals that support the producer in some way, but they're not like the executive producer. So sometimes you might have a producer who's in charge of getting special effects artists right, and a special effects team, as opposed to a producer who will hire visual effects people who will do stuff inside of the computers and the visual effects team. Those are two completely different teams. So you might have two individuals that hire directors who are in charge of those teams that they will make sure that those individuals are understanding what's happening in the film, but they might not necessarily be the ones that are in charge of all those different people. Okay, so that's the reason why they're called associate producers or co-producers. Sometimes in here, you might have two individuals that will film two different scenes. You might have a director in both places, but someone will do one part of the story, and another person will do a different part of the story. So you have different producers for different parts of your story. And then last but not least, again, this is something that Marissa was alluding to earlier. We have what's called the line producer. The line producer is in charge of the daily financials. Okay, making sure that we're not overspending, making sure that we're spending enough to make sure the production looks the way it needs to look, and then also making sure that the money is going to proper individuals correctly and that people get paid on time. Because if people are involved in doing this and aren't getting paid on time, you have mad and upset people. Okay? So those are the three typically that you guys will work with inside of here, inside of class. Okay? Executive producers, like for example, for your videos, I would probably be an executive producer because I'm telling you guys what kind of project to do, and I might help you out here and there, but I'm not really involved with it. Producers, you guys would all have your individual and own producers in here, and then a line producer, someone in your group would probably be in charge of the money. Are you really going to go spend 20 bucks at Party City to get these supplies in order to get this shot for this one particular scene? Or are you going to try and see if you're going to borrow things from different people in order to just add it into the scene, right? That's what a line producer will do. Okay. Cool. Let's go ahead and go to the next one. So this is just the differences between producer and director. You guys have kind of already heard this from me a little bit here and there. Director is in charge of principal photography. So they're the ones that are in charge of making sure things run accordingly for a particular project because that's what they're hired to do. Start a project, carry it through to completion. My example I like to use is that this would be Spike Lee for the film Inside Man. Okay, he was hired by a producer, in this case Brian Grazer, to carry out and to do that particular film. The producer is usually the chief of staff on a production site. So they will oversee and they will take a look at everything to make sure that it is operating correctly for what they actually intend to utilize it for. Okay. Again, this is a nice going back and forth between the two of them because they're very good at understanding how each other works. So if you don't know the story of Spike Lee and Spike Lee, his films actually in a lot of ways were having a tough time getting made. And so what he ended up having to do was to go to a studio to try and get them to pay attention to some of his stuff. Once he went to the studio to try and get them to pay attention to more of his stuff, that is when all of a sudden his career started to kind of go back uphill a little bit. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at kind of how these individuals all rolled together. So that way you can understand a little bit better how the relationship between a director and producer actually works. This will be, sorry, as I'm trying to pull up some of the stuff that I have in here. This is from the film Inside Man that we're going to take a look at. It's a rated R film, so I can't say, hey, you guys should go check this stuff out. But the behind the scenes stuff is really interesting, and that's kind of what I wanted to point us to. Because again, the better we understand the kind of behind the scenes stuff, the more likely we are to kind of roll with, whoops, here we go. Roll and make sure that our content is actually really good as well. Goodness gracious, lots of emails today. It's great. It's great. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the film, like I said, Inside Man. I'm going to pop this out really quick. This is going to be fun. Pop this into here. We'll see if this actually pops up here on screen. Technology is always a fun device to use and utilize. Okay, let's pop this out here. See if that goes away because it's like it froze up there on the screen. And we'll take a look at the film inside man as soon as I can get it to pop up. And roll. If it decides it wants to pop up and roll. Fantastic. So maybe we won't take a look at it then today. I'll post the video clip up on our haiku page because technology is always fun to try and get to work, and this does not want it to work. So we'll come back to that a little bit later on. Okay? Cool. Anyone have any questions about the role of the producer? Since I didn't get the video up and going this time through. No? Okay, cool. So we're going to spend the last 40 minutes or so of class talking about the roles of different crew members. So I want you with your group to go ahead and see if you guys can figure out, as I pull on that, a couple of members of a crew. So if you're a director and you're hiring individuals, I want you guys to come up with at least one for your group, because I'm going to pop around and go to each different group. But name a minimum of 5 different members of a video crew and define their jobs. I'm going to take 2 minutes. We'll be right back. All right, cool, and we're back. So, anyone want to answer this particular question for your groups? Name a minimum of 5 crew members and define their jobs. Anyone go for that? Go for it. What do you got for us, Kim? All right, yeah. Say it again? Best boy? Cool. Can you define what a best boy is?
So there's 2 versions of it.
Okay.
There's gaffer, which is for electrical.
Good.
And then key grip, which is for lighting.
Good. We're going to talk about both of those actually today when we go through that stuff. Okay? Anyone else? No? This is the reason why we're going to spend a little bit of time kind of going over some of the definitions of different key crew members, okay, for different positions. I want to go through probably about 12 different, maybe 15 different crew members and kind of define what it is that they actually do, and then give you an example of how these all work together when we take a look at the film Catch Me If You Can. Now that I actually got this to work, we're actually going to take a look at how a producer and director kind of go through and work on stuff. You'll see some of these other individuals hiding in the background. Those other individuals are part of the crew, and you'll see kind of what it is that they do and how they contribute to a particular group as things are working together. All right, but look at how they go through a table read. This is from back in 2005 for the film Inside Man.
Russell, you stand up. Russell wrote the script.
It's a great script. It was written by Russell Gurwitz, and first-time screenwriter. When I first read the screenplay, what impressed me was that he was taking a basic staple genre, the heist film, but updating it. But at the same time, not trying to act like this is the first time it's being done. So you could tell there was homages to Dog Day Afternoon, you know, stuff like that.
I don't need your fucking status report, Circa. Go. You saw Dog Day Afternoon. You're stalling.
You have a great cast. So you just go around the room and you say your real name and the role that you're playing. We'll start Mr. D.
Denzel. Playing Frazier.
Jodie Foster, Madeline White.
I'd always wanted to work with Spike Lee, and we've come very close. So Spike and I have kind of danced together for a long time.
We had a meeting, you know, very early on, was really to see if he could work with me and I could work with him.
I said, look, I don't want to get in a fight with you, because you're too tough. And he said, I promise you we won't fight. And literally, we didn't.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about their relationship. What did you notice? Okay, go for it. Okay, they both respect each other, right? Producer on the right, director on the left. What else? Did it seem like one was trying to go run over the other? Who seemed like they were in charge? Both of them. They both understood their role. Okay, this is where Mr. Wager was talking about leadership this morning and talked about how leadership is an action. It's not a position. They might be in positions that are higher up, but the way in which they interact with each other is going to lead people kind of going forward. Now, you'll hear Spike Lee actually had a problem with some of his films. And you'll see why he doesn't like working with particular producers, because certain things kept on happening, and he really couldn't control necessarily what was happening. It was Brian Grazer's job, the producer's job. It wasn't actually Brian Grazer himself, but it was his particular role that was supposed to be taking care of those things. And that's what they're going to touch on here coming up here in just a second.
You know, Brian Grazer's clout, you know, so it's been a while since I had the clout of the studio working for me, and it's a good feeling, you know, because I'm telling you, there were some times when, like, the day before the movie opens, people walk me up the street, so when's the next movie out? The day before the movie's opening. So it's been a while. So when's the next movie coming out? I'm like, yo, it's coming out tomorrow. I didn't know.
And I just love the marketing of a movie, because that is also turning ether into a solid. And it's trying to understand what are those ideas that are supposed to enter the ozone first. And I'm very interested in the granulation of our cultural zeitgeist and how it works.
That's a big phrase right there. Did you hear what phrase he used? Granulation of our cultural zeitgeist. Anyone want to take a guess at what the hell that even means? Start there. Okay, granulation. Okay, grains of sand. So how things are going to move. Granulation, grinding things up. Where do they all fall? Why are certain ones on top as opposed to ones on the bottom? Cultural. Okay, so our culture. How do things shake up kind of in our culture? Who's on top? Who's at the bottom? Zeitgeist. How do these things interact with each other? So he's trying to figure out how in the world does information move from one person to the next in our culture. That is something that he loves. And you could hear Spike Lee was having problems with what? Marketing of a film, right? What does Brian Grazer love to do? Market a film. Spike Lee had a problem. People were coming up to him saying, hey, when's your next movie coming out? Spike's like, this week. And people were like, really? I didn't know. I didn't know. Why? Because the producers that he had working on that didn't do a good job of marketing and distributing the film so people would go see it. People don't know about a particular film. They're not necessarily going to go see it. Right? Very few of you in here know about Tenet right now, the film Tenet. The reason why you don't know about it yet is because it's still a year from being a year away from being released. Right? That's because it hasn't marketed correctly yet. But eventually you'll start to hear as the year goes on, about a film called Tenet. You might even see a trailer here coming up pretty soon. So there's a lot of ways that a producer can make sure people know about a particular film and work well together. Okay? And it doesn't just stop there. It transitions into the acting.
Some of you guys are reading extra roles, so right now we have to read it.
I told you my name, that's the boo. Where it could most readily be described as a prison cell, but there is a vast difference between being stuck in a tiny cell and being in prison, and I'm not in prison. The what is easy. Recently I planned and set in motion events to execute the perfect bank robbery.
When I read a script, sometimes names and faces will pop out automatically. Who could play these parts? You have your hope list, your wish list.
I just was in the midst of working on Julius Caesar on Broadway, Shakespeare, which is a lot of language. And so I thought that would be good. That was good preparation for this, because this is a lot of language. There's a lot of chatter, especially my character. He does a lot of talking.
Maybe you can clear up the matter of the safe deposit of 5392. See, I went over to the bank safe deposit records. First glance, it all seemed fine, but it turns out there's one box with no record at all. And I mean, you're going all the way back to 1948, so I'm thinking...
Who would have the answer to this riddle? Probably the man who forgot to mention that he built the bank in the first place in 1948. It doesn't add up, Mr. Case. It does not add up. It's something really bad, isn't it?
Denzel's a very strong actor, so we needed someone, to be honest, that was not going to be scared of Denzel. Because if somebody went in there, weak, would have hurt the film. Because Denzel would just run all over him.
That's for the crowd. First, okay, no flame, big deal. Second, you don't order an assault when no hostages have been killed and there's no immediate threat. Third, it ends that way. Whatever happens, you don't get to be the hero. You want to harder. Let's go. It's very unusual playing a character where you cover yourself up so much, because for a large part of the movie, people can't see who it is. That's part of the story. So to play whole scenes where you're masked, you've got sunglasses on, you're hooded, it's very, very weird, because a lot of acting is often through intent, and intent is often shown through the eyes and what it is and how you do that. And to suddenly have all that taken away and have this big barrier there was very sort of disarming for a little while. And it's also disarming for the people you're working with. Denzel said to me, it's weird because you can't get in there to bounce off the other guy because you're acting just to this. That's the conceit of the movie, that's the deal going in, but it did take some getting used to.
Okay? So you can hear how all these actors not only discuss what it is that they're actually portraying, but how other individuals see it. It's very, 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 very collaborative in the spirit that they actually try and push their stuff together in. Okay? So you can see just how important it is for a director and producer to be on the same page. The producer has to have a very good idea and understanding of what it is that they are coming up with for their story, how they want to market it to a particular audience, and then they have to make sure that the director has a very good understanding of what it is that they're marketing towards everyone else, right? Okay. So let's go over these three phases really quick. Okay, if it decides it wants to pop up on here, that would be fantastic, but we'll wait and see. Okay, phases of production. There's three of them. 3 different phases of production. Okay, you have pre-production, production, and post-production. By the way, if this doesn't work, this doesn't want to work, you can always take a look at the screen over here, and that'll have it up there for you guys. Okay. Pre-production is all the work that's done on a project before the project actually starts filming, or before production. Hence the reason why it's called pre-production, right? Production is when you're actually doing the making or manufacturing of the thing. Post-production is all the work that's done after the project is done doing the thing. So this is the time where you go in, go back, and fix things up. So I like to think of it this way, that pre-production is planning and building, planning and phasing, I guess you can say. Production is the action of building. Okay, it's putting together whatever it is you're working on. And then post-production is going back and fixing it. Okay, whatever that it actually is. Okay, So if you're thinking about a house and how a house is built, I'm going to go ahead and turn off this projector because this projector isn't working, and then we'll try and turn it back on here again in a little bit. A house is built. First of all, you got to come up with the plans. You need an architect, okay, to figure out what those plans are, right? Figure out how you're going to build this house, what this house is going to look like. They will then gather the materials. They'll make sure all the materials are paid for, everything's costed out, and so on and so forth. Then you have, during the production phase, is when you actually build the house. Okay, you're actually laying the foundation, you're adding in sewers, adding in pipes, doing all this other stuff. That's the fun part, right? Because you actually get to do the building part of it. And then post-production is what happens after the house is built. How are you going to make all this money back? How are you going to sell it? Who are you going to sell it to? Are you going to make sure that someone takes care of it? Who's going to be taking care of it, and how are they going to make sure it's taken care of? What happens if things go wrong? All the exchanges of the licenses and so on and so forth. Who actually owns that particular piece of property, the housing deed, right? So that's how you can think of or take a look at building a particular film. It's not just, okay, let's pick up a camera and start filming. You can do that, but what are you going to add that to, right? YouTube, if you just even think about YouTube and how that's presented. YouTube has to think way ahead of time, pre-production wise. We need to buy all the equipment, buy all the parts for people to be able to upload their content or be able to stream live. People love doing the uploading and the streaming live part. Why? Because then at post-production on the way back, when people actually go and take a look at the film, they can see what it looks like and how the web page actually turned out. Right? Because on the back end, the post-production side of things, you have to build a web page, you have to have people be able to go there so that way they can be able to watch the content and so on and so forth. And then what are you going to do to try and keep bringing people back? That's the analytics. So you go back and analyze different things to try and make sure that your audience, you can kind of keep them around because you like having them around. Right? So there's a lot to do in each of these phases of production. Okay? Pre-production, production, post-production. So let's take a look at some of those, some of the crew members. First one that we have, pre-production. We have already gone over these. All of these have been written out. You have all these different definitions. Okay? We talked about the director, the producer, and the talent. Director manages others in the making of a production. Producer oversees that management of making a production. The talent are the people that actually bring the production to life. Those are your three main parts and your three main goals. Okay? For people that dang it, that didn't work. For people that haven't taken a look at this, you can go back and take a look at previous PowerPoints or go back and take a look at the previous lectures, and you'll be able to come up and see this particular information. Yes. Okay. No. Yes. There we go. Okay. Director, producer, talent. Next thing that we have, these are individuals that we haven't really talked about. They won't really necessarily show up on any quizzes or exams, so we're not going to go into too much detail, but I want to show you that you can have sub-directors in the same way that you can have sub-producers. So typically individuals that you actually have that are sub-directors follow three areas: art, lighting, tech. If you just remember Alt, you'll be fine. Okay, it's like an Alt, it's a button on the keyboard. Okay, so the art director oversees all the artists and craftspeople that build things. The lighting director is the person that determines the light that lights the things. And the technical director is the person who's making sure that there's equipment to light the things. Okay? Or if there are things that are going to be lit, that they can be recorded. So it's very simplistic, very, very straightforward with these sub-directors and what it is that they do. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because I think our time is better spent watching these people in action. So what I want to do is I want to go over the members of the crew really quick, and it's a lot that we're going to do for the production part of things. This is all pre-production. If you're a director, these are the three areas you kind of want to look into. You want to see, okay, what's our video going to look like? Okay, what's the art going to be like? How are we going to light it? And then what are we going to do to make sure it looks in the way that we want it to look? All right? So here we go. Let's start going through all these different crew members. These are listed in alphabetical order. It's basically a lot of definitions. I'm going to spend a lot of time discussing and talking about it. I didn't do every single crew member. I just did the ones that are going to be important for you guys to be able to do well for your production this year. Okay? The only reason why I'm defining these words, by the way, is because I want to be sure that you guys know who and what you're talking about and whose job it is to do what particular thing. Because when it comes time to turn in your projects, if the production fell apart and the video looks bad, we want to look back and be like, okay, who do we need to blame and why? It's not just that person over there because they didn't listen to me. It's the audio engineer because the audio engineer didn't make sure that our audio sounded good. So if you listen into our video, the audio is going to sound like crap, right? So that's the reason why I wanted to find these individuals. Now this is, again, it's not everyone. It's just everyone that's important enough for you to make good video, or if it's going to be on a quiz or a test for the most part. Okay, audio engineer. Audio engineer is the person responsible for all audio equipment that is used on a production site, and make sure it's used properly. Okay, that way if people are having mic packs or whatever, they're not just wandering off with them, or they're sitting on them, or they're bending and breaking cables and so on and so forth. Right? Boom operator. This is the person responsible for the operation of a boom microphone. So you'll see in the video coming up when we take a look at Catch Me If You Can, there's an individual that's holding a mic above the talent. So they can mic and walk around wherever they need to mic the talent. Typically the talent doesn't wear mics unless they're really far away. Typically they should be within arm's reach, within 10 to 15 feet of a particular camera. If they're not, then the audio engineer will work on a wireless way to transmit that audio from the actors to someone else. In your guys' case, if you're getting a wide shot, you're not going to get very good audio because the person's too far away from the person who is controlling the audio. You want to try and get something a little bit closer. Okay. Cinematographer. This is also known as the director of photography. Okay. We talked about how, again, video is nothing more than a bunch of photographs being taken really, really fast and kind of being sped up. You're seeing so many frames per second in front of your face. So really, they're a photographer. The difference is their subjects move. So the cinematographer figures out how do those subjects move in relation to that particular image. And the cinematographer and the director will talk that out. So they're the person responsible for framing different shots. Okay? Typically they work with a storyboard artist, or they themselves will storyboard their shots. They might not be the best looking shots, but they'll give a very good brief idea of what they're looking at getting for the director. Okay? So for your guys' project, storyboarding, it will probably be done by the person who's going to be controlling the camera. Which, if you can't control, if you're going to control a camera, you got to work on them drawing skills, not how amazing, beautiful, and so on and so forth that they look for communication purposes. Okay. Next one that we have, costume designer. Okay, costume designer designs costumes that are worn by the talent, figuring out how the talent's going to look up on screen. You also have a floor manager. This is the person responsible for making sure that a set is clean and tidy. Even if you go and film on location around campus, your floor manager is making sure that people aren't tripping over sticks, falling down stairs, that there's not certain things in the background where people can trip and fall. That's the best thing that I like to use. Or another analogy I like to use is making sure there's not a trash can in your shot. Okay? If you go back and watch the 2019-2020 intro video for our school, I was working with the camera operator, the person working with the drone, to get the shots that I wanted, right? One of the things that I did is I moved trash cans out of the way. Problem is that if you look in that opening shot, I didn't move one of those trash cans out of the way. So every time I see that opening shot, people are looking at the American flag and like, oh, it's so beautiful in the way that it's done. And I'm only looking down at the bottom right-hand corner because all I can see is that freaking trash can that it didn't get moved, okay? And I was looking on a small little phone screen, so I didn't see it right there. Okay. Last thing was mentioned earlier, gaffer. Literally translates to mean old man. This is the person that's in charge of the electrical department. Okay. Electricity has been around for about 150 or so years. Typically the person in charge of electricity should have been working around electricity for a long period of time. So when things go down, they should know how to bring them back up. Remember, we talked about how video can't be done without electricity. So you got to have someone who's in charge of the tech and knows and understands that electricity. Okay. Again, if I'm going too fast like you guys are doing, take a picture or take a look at the PowerPoint a little bit later on. All right. Next three people, grip, makeup artist, and production assistant. So a grip is someone who is responsible for the maintenance and position of equipment on a film site. If you want what's called a tracking shot, where basically the shot, and the camera moves alongside with the talent, they track together, or you build a track. There's one of two ways you can do that. Okay, you can put down rail, put some wheels on top of that railing and slide a person on that rail, or you can utilize a piece of equipment that has wheels on it and move them from left to right or right to left, front to back, however you're going to move them. Either way, you need someone to be able to move that equipment. The camera person's got to concentrate, or the camera operator, I should say, has to concentrate on what it is that they're getting their shot for and what they're getting their shot of. They can't concentrate on the movement as well that they're undertaking. So you need someone to operate in congruency, I guess you can say, or with the camera operator to make sure you get the shot that you actually want and the shot that you actually need if the camera itself has to be moved. Okay, so that's what a grip does. The grip is the one who does the moving. Makeup artist, pretty simple, making sure that people are made up to be the way that they're supposed to be. And last but not least, we have a production assistant. Production assistant is the person who's responsible for taking any notes on the set or bringing to attention to the producer about things that are wrong on set. Okay? Sometimes talent have their own PAs or production assistants. These are individuals that they're sometimes nicknamed or called gophers. Not because they're like those little animals with the buck teeth and so on and so forth that dig and burrow underneath things. It's because they go for things. So I need you to go get this. So can you go get this for me? That's the reason why they're called gophers. So production assistants are typically used on set. They go and do everything. Your first job in the industry won't be a director, won't be a producer, more than likely. It'll be a PA, production assistant, where it's like, hey, if they want you to go take care of things, so you go take care of it. In my class, my TAs, I don't even call them TAs, I call them PAs, production assistants, because they're like bringing to my attention things that are wrong. So right now, like Kaylee, who's normally in here, she's in there because I don't have anything for her to do. So she's in there, A, working on her work to make sure that she's staying up in her other classes, so that way she can keep coming back in here and keep producing content if needed. Okay? Or B, she's going in there and she's taking a look at all the equipment that's in there and bringing to my attention things that are wrong if she finds anything that's wrong. Okay, so that's what production assistants typically do. That's what you guys are supposed to be doing if you're TAing in a lot of ways, right? Okay, and then last one for today, and then we'll take a look at the film Catch Me If You Can, and then we'll get you guys out of here. Set designer, technical advisor, and wrangler. Set designer designs the set, so even if you're going to be filming outside, up against the wall, I can actually see some people down there taking pictures and photos right now on the steps. Okay, you can still have someone decide what those steps and how those people are going to look inside of those steps. Right? When we do rallies or we do other stuff around campus to make sure that you guys are pumped for a Spirit Week, in theory, we are designing a set. We're translating a director's vision about what the school should look like into a practicality and saying, does this make sense? So one of the things that I know Link Crew does around here is to catch people's attention. They will not post stuff necessarily up on the walls. Why? Because if you were to take a look around in here, there's like 20 different, maybe 30, 40 different things that are posted up on the walls. Nothing's going to stand out to you. So what they'll do is as you're walking down the hall, if you're looking at your phone or some other stuff, they will actually put stuff on the ground because that'll catch people's more of their attention. They're more likely to take a look at it. Why? Because the ground's not supposed to be cluttered because people need to be able to walk to and fro. But not only that, people might be looking down at their phones and see something on the ground as they go past, right? The director, in this case Ms. Parsons, had the idea to see a better way of getting people's attention and for people to take a look at stuff coming up so that way they don't miss certain things. So set designers find a way to design these ideas to bring it to life to get more people's attention, to pay attention to certain parts of particular things. Technical advisors are experts on a very specific subject or subject matter, and they're brought in specifically to discuss and tell the talent or the crew how they're supposed to act in the very specific circumstances. So for the film Saving Private Ryan, Steven Spielberg hired a guy who was basically a general or someone who was higher up in the military during World War II to make sure that it looked World War II specific and that his talent acted as if they just walked out of 1944. Okay, because they had to be very technically precise because there were still people alive in 1997 who were watching this play out on screen 53 years later, right? So if you get something wrong, they're going to be the first people to call you out on it, even if they themselves are 80, 90 years old, okay? So technical advisor, someone very, very important to kind of bring back in to do different things. And last but not least, wrangler. Typically, they're in charge of animals, but it's all entities who cannot be spoken with on set. It includes more than just animals, but we'll leave it at animals. Sometimes you'll get someone who is in charge of little kids, and it's not just the parents. The wrangler is the person who makes sure all those little kids get to where they're supposed to be going for a particular shot and do what they're supposed to do, right? So that's why they're called a wrangler. They just wrangle things and bring them and catch them all. Right? It's like they're like Pokemon, I swear to God, little kids. My 14-month-old is just like that himself, running all over the place. Okay. So that's all that I have for today regarding notes, but I want us to take a look at how all these positions function and run together. So I have a behind the scenes video from the film Catch Me If You Can. Let's take a look at that here. For those of you that don't know what Catch Me If You Can is, it is a film that came out in, I want to say, the mid-2000s, maybe 2005. And it's about an individual who is very good at lying to people about who and what he is. Very good at trying to be someone or something else to get something done. Leonardo DiCaprio stars in this film, and it's widely considered to be one of Spielberg's most underrated hits with how it was put together. And the reason why it's considered underrated is because he's done other things like Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, Saving Private Ryan, AI, artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth. So this is something that kind of just stays in the background, but it's a very, very well put together if you're really studying film. So let's take a look and see how these individuals kind of come together to actually put together a film. We're going to start a little ways in, and we're going to start with an individual who's in charge of set dressing. And I want to see how all of these individuals kind of come together. Mary Zophres, whom you'll hear about, Steven Spielberg, you'll hear about, Janusz Kaminski, who's the cinematographer. How all these individuals kind of came together to put on a production, because it's not just Spielberg making all these decisions. There's other individuals making decisions. And where they're filming the airport scenes is the old Ontario Airport, which is right up the way here. So it's not that far away where most of this production actually kind of took place, because he was a pilot for a good portion of the production. So let's take a look and see how they kind of started putting stuff together.
Normally do.
Well, it looks better. That should be all right. We have what, one departure board for Pan Am?
Janine Openwell's a wonderful designer, and it was a guerrilla operation. Once again, she had a commando crew that went out and begged, borrow what they had to in order to get this period to look absolutely 60s perfect.
And we're now 40 years away from that. The farther you get away from it, the harder it gets to get back. So we spend an enormous amount of time taking stuff that's bad out, hiding it with bushes, hiding it with boxes, painting it away, finding creative ways to disguise things. That's how you slowly peel it back until you feel like you're where you're supposed to be.
Okay, so that's something I want you guys to concentrate on this year. A lot of you guys are going to be filming your stuff on campus. How do you make this school not look like a school? How can you make this particular classroom look like someone's bedroom? Right? Just because it is the way it is doesn't mean it has to be that way when you put a camera in front of it. Right? We're trying to tell truths that are greater than the truth that's just in front of us, rather than the facts, I should say, that are just in front of us. Right? So if I wanted to convert this classroom into a bedroom, I would probably just use that back corner back there. You have a window right there. You lay something down on that particular piece of shelving or whatever, desk, bring in a pillow, bring in a couple blankets, toss it over the top. Someone sits up. It looks like a dorm room. They're looking outside their dorm room, right? Or a bedroom. Very simple. You only have to use that corner of that particular room in order to make this room look like a bedroom. There's a lot of different ways that you can be creative with how you produce and put on your particular project.
We're going to do as much as we can today.
Okay.
We're going to take an extremely early call Monday.
We did a lot of research. I happen to have my own, huge collection of research materials available. I talked with Mary, the costume designer, for a long time, and we talked about a color arc of emotion in the movie, in which he would start in a kind of an ordinary, slightly monochromatic environment, and as he got better and better at his game, things would get wilder and wilder in terms of color.
It's a big part. Sorry. You're hearing a lot about research, okay? Cool. What you're hearing a lot from these designers is just how much time and effort they go into putting behind the scenes for their stuff that comes up on screen, right? They're thinking about things way before anyone else can actually see them, because your job is to head off people's knowledge that what they're watching and what they're perceiving and what they're taking a look at isn't actually real. You're trying to make them feel as if it really is as real as it possibly can be. So the way to do that is by doing research. So in their case, because this is a 1960s film, they had to go back and take a look at things from the 1960s to try and make it look like the 1960s. But not just look like it, feel like it. Okay? It's very different having a hippie vibe that's anti-government versus like an Antifa or a like white nationalist like argument stuff that's going on in today's politics. Okay? The big differences between those individuals and the clashes between the two are much, much different between police and hippies in the 1960s versus today. So trying to understand the culture that you're in and doing the research on other cultures and how that culture can affect your video to make it feel more real becomes very, very important.
Party scene, of course, 1960s, great fun, great house, just a fun, everything you think a 1960s party would be.
That's one of my favorite sets, actually. It's the set that we could have the most wild fun in. We took some ingredients from our research of Playboy magazines of the period and crossed it with our knowledge of the craziest furniture so that it felt kind of wild and trendy. We were going for something that was really kind of a sophisticated party house with a certain amount of bad taste.
So we provided, champagne, drinks, the fondue, anything that the actors were holding, we had. Set dressing, provided a tremendous amount of plates and glasses, and we had a food stylist come in to help us with the fondue, which it's burnt cheese, so yeah, it tends to not be pleasant on the set after about an hour.
Frank, this fondue is so good!
Great, yeah. That fondue. I had fondue when I was young, but I never had that sort of really smelly fondue that, affects an entire room like that. Fondue couldn't smell that bad. Who would want to eat that?
Catch Me If You Can props really did need to tell the story because a lot of times you don't know who he is. So a document had to tell you, oh, there's his passport, there's his birth certificate.
Leo.
So it was very challenging creating, all the documents needed for every different period we were in and for whatever character he was playing.
It should bring the focus to the diploma. I want to be able to read the diploma.
We probably created over 100, 150 different documents using all different grades of paper, watermark paper, whatever it might be. It wasn't like I could just go to a neighboring prop house and order this. There's stuff we had to find, and with the help of our graphics department, put all these different elements together into what we needed pertaining to the script.
Hey, Mary, isn't he wearing a Manhattan Eagle suit? Mary Zoffrey is the costume designer, and I specifically wanted to work with her because I had loved so much of her work with the Coen brothers. What you do when you design costumes for an actual period, as opposed to something which is mythological or swords and sorcery or science fiction, you have to be authentic to the period. So she did a lot of research, and every single week she would bring books in, and Life magazines in, and Look magazines in, and all sorts of periodicals. We would pour through them and almost laugh at the kind of clothes that people wore back then. My God, it was awful. But I think she was able to make what I thought was kitschy and awful into a real sort of funny style.
Okay, so again, you hear this research, and this building of things that people don't necessarily pay attention to. It's not just the actors that are up on screen. It's all the stuff in the background, because the background will tell just as much of the story as it will the talent up on scene. If you actually go up on screen, I should say. If you actually take a look at our show today on BNN, the way the shot is filled, there's a lot of empty space in that shot when Mr. Bean is up on screen, because the person that was operating the camera wasn't the original person that was supposed to be operating the camera. So you see it's slightly off to the side, it's a little askew, like the shot isn't actually what they were supposed to get, but the person that was supposed to do the filming didn't bring the camera today, or not bring the camera, but they forgot to show up to get the camera to go and film the thing. Right? And so when we project that and send that information out to you guys regarding senior parking, you can see why it looks like someone was just there and someone held up a phone. It's because that's actually what ended up happening, because no one was there to get the actual shot like they were supposed to. Right? So it all kind of plays into the story. And again, listen to how many times they talk about research.
Terry, this is Italian knit. Watch where you're going.
It's a real person's life. Let's make it look real instead of overly designed. So that's what I started off by doing, is a lot of research. And then from there, I went off and did my own interpretation of that. When I first read the script, I thought, oh, he's in his pilot uniform an awful lot. And then I read it again, and I realized that he had 100 wardrobe changes. 100, that's a lot.
Say cheese.
There's about 130 day players, and there's about 3,000 to 4,000 background in this movie. So we have a lot of purchases that we got on the show, and we rented from all over Los Angeles. I think we wiped out Los Angeles completely of 60s because there were so many different looks in this movie. We had New York City, we had the South, we had bathing suits, and we had sexy girls, and we had Southern belles. You know, you name it, we used it. We used a lot of different stock. And then when we go to France, it's a whole nother look. There were certain things that we did to just sort of help tell the story, because Frank has so many different changes and so many different looks in the movie, and he's in so many different places. I mean, how do you make it easier for the audience to kind of sense that you're in a different place? So I did a lot of play there with the palette of the film.
Okay, so again, trying to understand what's happening in the background, helping to enhance the story. The writer doesn't say this person needs to be in a pilot uniform here, this person needs to be in jeans and a flannel shirt here, this person needs to have their hair done here. It's not the writer's job. The writer's job is to tell you, here's what the talent is supposed to do. It's up to the costume designers to design how they're supposed to look. And once she looked at the script and realized they're in 100 different places, or he changes clothes 100 different times, which means that the chances of him actually being on screen in the same day are basically nil. He's got at least 3 changes. He's up there on screen. We're going to see at least 30 different days of this guy's life. So how can we try and tell these 30 different days without ever saying a word? Let's just show it up on screen. And you can see that by what he wears, how he looks, and how he comes across. Because then once the actor gets those costumes on, then they can become and assume that particular character in that particular state. The better that they look the part, the better they will act the part, because it feels natural, right? Now what about the cinematographer?
I'm not sure if this is the move, but
Yeah, that's enough.
Stop.
Janusz Kaminski, my cinematographer, and I decided to play against the darkness of both AI and Minority Report, and instead concoct a rich dessert with Catch Me If You Can. Colorful, using a lot of primary colors, celebrating the cars of the 60s, celebrating the costumes, the funky hair with the flips. I mean, it really is a movie about hair and makeup and wardrobe and style.
Now we can cross, with the table here, we can cross all the things on the table. And people drinking and...
Yeah, we'll have to raise the table.
Yeah.
That will work. Visual approach was really simple. Let's have fun. Let's not make it too serious. Let's make it a little bit of a comedic, and let's create a world that's slightly idealistic. Let's create a world that's slightly champagne-like, you know, and the lighting reflects that.
That's fantastic. That's really great.
Okay, notice in the previous shots it was daytime when they were setting up, and it was nighttime when they were actually shooting. Okay, this is why these things go on for 12, 16 hours typically in a day, because you want to prep pre-production, making sure the house looks good. You're going to have 4,000 people, or however many people you're going to have inside of this house for this particular party, and so on and so forth. There's background and extras. We're going to make sure they get their costumes. We're going to make sure we get the house. We're going to make sure we get the right players in place. Now let's bring the camera in. And in theory, the camera operators and the storyboard artist should have thought about where they wanted camera placement ahead of time. So when they show up at the house, they're just setting up the equipment for their particular shots, and they get their shots. And you can kind of see that he was utilizing a lens finder. Okay, he was trying to find a particular shot. Talking about, okay, now we got to make our minor adjustments. Let's raise the table. Table's fine in the position that's at, but let's raise it. Okay, so that way we can get our shot that we want. Let's have these actors, instead of walking this fast, let's just slow down just a little bit, and now we can get our shot, right? Planning, 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 research, research, research. When you get there, actually do the shot, do the film. Then when it's done, go back and fix things up and recolor it, or re-edit it, I guess you can say. Sound and video. And you can hear, they were talking about those 9 major components we talked about for video. Color, lighting, scenery, script, sound, plot, talent, crew, camera. All 9 of those things they're thinking about before they ever get there to actually shoot that particular video. Okay? Any questions about the role of the producer and the crew? Because the producer and the crew plays a very vital role in bringing this story to life. Okay? There's a lot of stuff that goes into this. Doesn't mean you always have to overplan. This stuff starts to come naturally to you very, very quickly. But it is very good to know about it ahead of time, because the more that you know ahead of time, the more likely you are to get the shot that you want the first time around.